I'd like to thank everybody for attending today, and I'd especially like to thank SAHPRA for availing themselves today to speak on some really, really important matters as it pertains to the regulatory environment for our health products in South Africa. So we have 3 speakers today. We are just awaiting the last one, but we're going to slightly change the order as we are awaiting the CEO. So the first speaker we'll have today will be Dr. Andrea Keita, and she will be speaking to us specifically about the medical devices environment and the application of the various rules and regulations around medical devices by SAHPRA. That'll be followed by Robert Makuba, who will be updating and providing guidance from the complementary medicines unit. And then we'll close off with the CEO, Dr. Boitumelo Semete, giving us an update on the strategic priorities and the regulatory updates for SAHPRA. We will do a short Q&A of 5 minutes between each speaker, just so that we don't lose track of our thoughts and our questions, because each one of them will be speaking about various matters. We'll try and keep them short to 5 minutes. I do apologize in advance should we not get to your question during that time. What we will subsequently do is we'll keep track of the questions that were unanswered during those sessions, and then we will do some responses after the webinar to address any of those questions. I would like to ask, however, that the attendees please try to avoid asking questions as it pertains to any particular applications, any of your personal journeys with SAHPRA, and rather keep the questions rather broad so that it bears application to the audience as a whole. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to ask Andrea Keita to start with her presentation.
Great. Thank you so much, Jacinta, and also for the opportunity to present and share the information today. I'm going to just start sharing my screen in a minute. All good to go. So for today's session, we just want to share some highlights with you in terms of updates, and also some of the requirements that have been, you know, a lot of applicants and so on have been dealing with and getting to terms with as we move through the COVID period. So this is really just to capture what SAHPRA has been doing in response to COVID, some of the regulatory requirements that applicants have had to meet to get certain commodities for COVID onto the market. And so let's dive straight in. As you know, SAHPRA is the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority, and we are mandated through the Medicines and Related Substances Act to regulate medical devices. And medical devices include those that are IVDs, so those are in vitro diagnostics, but also includes non-IVDs. So in terms of the COVID commodities, we see products like ventilators, we see all our PPE, gloves and masks and so on, all being, you know, considered and falling within the definition of a medical device. And SAHPRA, since June 2017, and the amendment of our Act, is responsible for regulating those. Good. And then also, when we look at the activities of SAHPRA, we obviously are responsible for regulation. We do monitoring of devices once they are made available to the market. There's also, evaluation activity that takes place, inspection, investigation, and registration. So that's really the full mandate of SAHPRA. But what we see, because we've only started in 2017 regulating devices, we do apply a phased approach in regulation. And so at the time of the COVID pandemic, where we were is at the point where all medical device establishments had to be licensed with SAHPRA in order to manufacture or distribute, which includes importing, exporting, and wholesaling. And the model that SAHPRA has adopted is very much based on the World Health Organization global model regulatory framework. And also when we look at the requirements, regulatory requirements and guidelines, these are also based on those guidelines that are developed by the International Medical Device Regulators Forum. So if you visit the SAHPRA website, you will already see quite a number of guidelines. There are more guidelines to come as we move through the additional activities that SAHPRA would be doing. And as I said, we are at this stage licensing medical device establishments. And through that licensing process, you require them to list any of the devices that you would manufacture, distribute, or wholesale. And these guidelines provide some information to the requirements in terms of the essential principles of safety and performance of devices, how to handle recalls and adverse events, how we classify medical devices and what the rules are for classification in terms of low-risk devices, which would be a Class A, up to the high-risk devices that are a Class D. Then we also have a guideline that provides a template to be used when putting together a quality manual for the license application, a brief document Q&A on how to go about licensing, and then 16.03 is probably the most important document when it comes to licensing medical device establishments. Then with COVID hitting the scene, we have had to bring on some additional resources. We really received quite a large number of applications for medical device establishments and additional listings of new products that came onto the market, in support of COVID and those COVID commodities that were required in country. So we did have some additional resources in terms of technical support, project management, administrative support, and we also had quite a few volunteers helping during the level 5 lockdown period. So that was really a great support to us during that time. You would also see that SAHPRA has been very much involved and trying to be as responsive as possible during the pandemic. So you would have seen quite a few interviews in terms of radio, media, news, or News 24 and so on, just to share information with the public on what the requirements are. There was a lot of focus on the test kits and the different types of test kits and regulatory requirements for those, as well as just trying to delineate between the different PPE that's available and what the requirements would be for that. So over this period, we've tried to be very active, sensitizing all the newcomers into the industry with regard to what processes are, what the standards and specifications are for products, and then also, of course, what the regulatory requirements are. We've also established interim expert committees to support the work of SAHPRA during this time, and that was looking specifically at ventilators that were being rapidly manufactured to support during the pandemic, as well as for the test kits that we received applications for, to do some kind of evaluation just on the basics, those principles of safety and performance of those particular test kits. So you would have also, if you had been applying to SAHPRA or involved at the time, SAHPRA had come up with an expedited regulatory pathway. So as best as we could, we tried to really speed up the process for listing of new devices, especially those where they did have COVID commodities, of course. And what we tried to do was have dedicated email address. So that was our MD COVID email address that was launched. And also at the same time, we activated the MD admin dedicated email address. All applications came in electronically, and we'll continue with the electronic submission as opposed to the hard copy. And we were also able to be kind of flexible, responsive, but also responsible in the approach of getting products that meet the requirements for safety, quality, and performance onto the South African market as quickly as possible. And I will take you just through a couple of steps and provisions within the legislation that then allowed us to do that. So also just from a timeline point of view, we were working off about 6 to 8 weeks to process a license application. We were striving to achieve 7 to 10 working days for the processing of applications. And for the majority, we were around 10 to 15 working days where we had complete license applications. With the various COVID commodities being available now on the market, we are going to revert back to the 6 to 8 week turnaround time for processing of license applications. Test kits were really kind of in demand, and we received multiple applications for the various test kits, and mostly we would see the molecular PCR test kit, which is for diagnosis of COVID. Then also the antibody test kits that are usually your rapid test kits that can detect whether or not you do have antibodies to COVID, but not used for diagnosis. And then the antigen test kits are starting to come through now. Again, not the gold standard for diagnosis, but could be used if there were circumstances where your PCR test might not be available or might not be able to produce a result quick enough. So just in terms of numbers, you'd see we really received a large volume. So for those serology antibody test kits, over 400 applications, about 150 for the molecular test kits, and 8 for the antigen tests. And SAHPRA has published the list of test kits, as well as the COVID commodities, whether it's PPEs or ventilators that have been authorized for use and are available on the South African markets. So just in terms of the evaluation criteria that is applied is we at SAHPRA do follow a reliance pathway, and that allows us to recognize regulatory decision of other recognized regulatory authorities. So that could be US FDA in America, the TGA in Australia, Health Canada, and Visa in Brazil, PMDA in Japan, or else WHO PQ. So we also recognize that there were those COVID commodities that might not have been either registered or listed for use by these jurisdictions. And so we were able to put some processes in place to at least do an evaluation of the performance of these products before allowing those onto the market. So again, as I had explained, since June 2017, SAHPRA has been mandated to have the regulatory oversight of devices. And I just call out here, it's a little bit technical, but just in a nutshell, of course, to manufacture, distribute, or wholesale a device, you need to have a license in terms of Section 22C of the Act. And then if we look at the regulations for devices in 5.1d, it says you need to provide a listing and specify each of those devices that you would provide onto the market. We then also have a provision in Regulation 5.4 that says SAHPRA can then approve that application for a license, and there could be conditions on the license. So you would see with the COVID commodities, because we've not registered any devices, we were able to issue licenses with conditions that then would be specific in terms of how we're going to ensure the safety and performance of these devices once they're on market, and a big emphasis on post-market surveillance, post-market reporting, so that we can monitor the use and performance of these products once they are being taken up by the public. Then also, and I think I've just touched on that, we really have a strong mandate. It's also recorded in Regulation 28 that we do need to ensure compliance with the essential principles of safety and performance. And you'd see that for any Class C or D higher risk medical device, SAHPRA had then been requesting that we get a copy of the technical dossier of that particular product so that we have it on file and can review the merits of each device that was listed. Lastly, we had also used Section 21 of the Act, which is a provision for the use of unregistered devices in South Africa, but there are of course conditions to that use, and SAHPRA would specify the period of use and perhaps the person or institution for use, and then any particular quantities that might be there. And of course, this again is really with the emphasis on that post-market surveillance and ensuring the safety, quality, and performance of these products on the market. So just closing off almost at the end, but we had also produced a series of communication documents, and these documents were really prepared to support any applicant that was going through the process and wanting to know what is the process, what are the steps, what do I need to submit, what are the timelines. So these documents were really able to put forward those regulatory requirements and processes, but also provided information in terms of different types of tests that could be used, different standard specifications and requirements for PPE. And we'd also prepared the certificate of free sale process document to support applicants in that regard. So this is just a listing of those documents. Also, again, we've got some Q&A documents that were prepared, and really just trying to support any applicants going through the process so that it was a bit easier and hopefully helpful with this series of documentation. Of course, when we reflect back and look at what we have done, and of course we recognize even over the past few years, once we embarked on the regulation of devices, that certainly there are areas where we wanted to improve. And when we reflect back and looking at the response in terms of COVID, there are those gaps that we identify that we want to close, and it's a priority for us. And certainly we recognize that capacity constraints with additional staff coming on board, we already see big changes, and so we'd like to continue improving the capacity within the unit. And then also in terms of the maturity of our regulatory model, we would like to start with the registration of devices as soon as possible, so that we are able to then evaluate using our registration framework, those devices that are on the market. Then we recognize the value that an electronic document management system would have and would allow applicants to track the status of their application and be able to see exactly where it is and allow for better responsiveness from the regulator. Then lastly, from an enforcement point of view, excuse me, we would like to be, sorry, I just want to have some more time. We would like to obviously process applications as fast as possible, but we do rely on the completeness of the application submitted. And also when there are questions posed to applicants or further information requested, we can then try to support applicants to get that faster turnaround time and really process applications faster. Then just lastly is that we also recognize that at the time during COVID, and especially at the start, there are quite a lot of new stakeholders who were wanting to put products on the market. And we'd noticed also that there were many individuals and companies contravening the requirements of the Act. And again, here we'd put out a publication, which was MD 12, just to state those basic requirements that you have to have a license to manufacture, distribute, or wholesale a device. You cannot advertise Class C and D devices to the layman. And of course that no medical device has been registered by SAHPRA, and only those that are listed on the license applications that are submitted to us by medical device establishments would have been, screened and evaluated by SAHPRA and are authorized for use in country. So we had to really do a lot of sensitization in this regard and advocacy, and also where we needed to report any contraventions to the Act, this needed to be directed to our regulatory compliance unit that's led by Mr. Dion Puven and also supported by Ms. Daphne Fafudi. So we just like to encourage anybody, if there is an identified or activity suspected to be in contravention of Act, for that to be reported. So just lastly, I just want to share with you some SAHPRA contact details, and we have put this information and we've made it available to Escrow, so I'm sure that's share that with you. And that's the end of our session. Thanks.
Thank you, Andrea. That was quite informative. And, I just can't help thinking what a difficult task it is to regulate something that's constantly moving now, especially with COVID. It's almost, people talk about trying to fly a plane while you're building it. It's almost as if we're trying to fly a rocket while we're trying to send it to the moon. So thank you for the update. And I think it's quite informative. We do have one question, so we'll answer this one and then we'll move on to the next presentation.
Okay.
The question is, do you provide training sessions, big application processes, and how do you ensure, as well as how to ensure correct application forms are used?
So actually in the past, we used to have workshops anytime there was a new guideline or document prepared or application form made available, we would actually have workshops and everybody would be able to participate. I think also with the use of these kind of webinars and so on, it makes it so much more accessible. So I think that's also just something that we could definitely revive, and a comment that we'd take in, but yes, we would be able to support in that regard, providing that type of training.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. And we can move on to our next speaker. That would be Mamalo Makuba, and he will be talking to us about complementary medicines.
Thank you. Am I audible?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Maybe for a few minutes, I'll just put my video on. At least everybody can appreciate who they're talking to. But for bandwidth, I'll put the video off and then I'll continue with the presentation only. Good afternoon. My name is Mamalo Robert Makuba. I'm a medicines registration officer in the complementary medicines unit. Now, okay. Just want to get my, okay, there we go. As we all are aware, the Medicines Act is the legislative framework that where under medicines are regulated. So the Medicines Act is accompanied by its regulations. Now, under the regulations of the Medicines Act, a government notice was published in August 2017 to provide for regulation of complementary medicines in South Africa. There was also a regulation gazette published in 2015, which is about 5 years ago by now, for fees payable to the authority. That will include fees payable for applications for complementary medicines. Now, in the published regulations, definitions for complementary medicines were introduced, whereby a complementary medicine was defined as any substance or mixture of substances that originates from plants, fungi, algae, seaweeds, lichens, minerals, animals, or other substances as determined by the authority. B, is used or purport to be suitable for use or manufactured or sold for use in Roman 1, maintaining, complementing, or assisting the physical or mental state, or to diagnose, treat, mitigate, modify, alleviate, or prevent disease or illness, or the symptoms or signs thereof, or abnormal physical or mental state of a human being or animal. And C, it's used as a health supplement or in accordance with those disciplines as determined by the authority. Now, a definition of a health supplement was also introduced in the regulations. I hope everybody can see there, which meant the substance or extract or mixture of substances as determined by the authority, sold in dosage forms, used or purported for use in restoring, correcting, or modifying any physical or mental state by A, complementing health, supplementing the diet, or a nutritional effect, and excludes injectable preparations, medicines, or substances listed as Schedule 1 or higher in the Act. Those definitions are very important with respect to complementary medicines. Now, in these regulations, a new category of medicines, category D, was introduced to provide for complementary medicines. Now, under the category D of medicines, in the Act, you have those different classes of medicines. We'll have the first class will be discipline-specific complementary medicines, and the second class will be health supplements. Under the discipline-specific complementary medicines, we find those 7 subgroups, which include aromatherapeutic medicines, Ayurvedic medicines, homeopathic medicines, traditional Chinese medicines, Unani tip medicines, Western herbal medicines, and a combination of any of those paradigms in the discipline-specific category class of complementary medicines. Now, on the website of the authority, the following guidelines are found. So these guidelines, as indicated, have been published and implemented as of today and over this period. The first guideline, guideline 7.1, is the safety and efficacy guideline for discipline-specific medicines. That is a guidance document for registration of discipline-specific complementary medicines. The guideline 7.2 is the roadmap which was published for implementation of the framework for registration of complementary medicines. The guideline number 3, which is the application form or the application format for submission of applications for registration of complementary medicines. It must be in ZACTD format, CTD standing for Common Technical Document. Guideline 7.4 is the guideline for submission of applications for registration of health supplements. It has its associated annexures. And guideline 7.5 relates to the quality aspects of complementary medicines, that is GMP. And guideline 7.6 is the guideline for specified substances that include, for example, camphor, menthol, and caffeine. So all these guidelines are available on the website of the authority at SAHPRA.org.za. Now, we know registration basically is essentially a process for demonstrating and substantiation of the safety, the quality, and the efficacy of medicinal products to the authority. So for safety, demonstration and substantiation to the authority, for high risk, for complementary medicines with high risk claims, clinical trials data is required. But for low risk complementary medicines, monograph information is sufficient to support an application for registration. And then GMP remains GMP, and efficacy is demonstrated by the above 2 safety and quality. Now, as I've mentioned, the application form has to be in ZACTD format, as seen on the last slide. The Medicines Act also makes provision for use of unregistered complementary medicinal products. These should be those products that are not available in the Republic of South Africa, and they should also not be in supply of more than 6 months for individual use. So an application for permission to use a registered complementary medicine may be made through completion of an application form by a practitioner registered in South Africa for a specified patient in South Africa. This should be accompanied by proof of payment of an application fee currently of 330 rands payable to the authority, and must also be accompanied by information about the products that are intended to be used. The product information should include information on the label of the product that shows, for example, the ingredients that the product contains and their quantities. And we also need to see things like the amount of product that is in a particular shipment that a patient or a client is bringing into the country for individual use. Anything more than 6 months supply for one person would not be allowed. Our turnaround time is 5 working days from the date we receive a complete application, and the completed applications can be submitted to the Complementary Medicines Unit via email at the address cms21@sahpra.org.za. And this dedicated mailbox is for applications for Section 21 applications for complementary medicines only. Now, just to wrap up, the bulk of the information is available on a web portal that was developed and went live last year in February. If you go to the website of the authority and at sahpra.org.za and you go under online services, you'll find the dedicated portal with information about complementary medicines. On that portal, you'll find all our guidance documents available and all the notices and templates that are required for complementary medicines purposes. To submit applications via the portal and or make any submissions, you need to register on the portal so that you should be able to can submit any information to the authority. But otherwise, for viewing any other documents, you don't really need to register. The kind of submissions and applications that you can make via the web portal will be applications for registration of health supplements, what you call Annex B applications. You can also make applications for licenses to manufacture or for wholesaling, for import or export, and also for distribution. There's also a portal, a link for submission of complaints about any product that anyone can have, which is complementary medicinal. That is any person, a member of the public, a company, or anyone who has a complaint about a certain complementary medicinal product can submit information or that complaint to the authority through that link on the website. Our contact details are also available on the website. If you go under contacts, and then you'll find various divisions. You go to pharmaceutical evaluations, and then other pharmaceutical evaluations, you'll find complementary medicine. That's how you can get in touch with us. But most of our communication, that is contacts, is preferably electronic. We rather have the information come either via email or via the website. That helps us have our limited personnel off the phones rather doing the actual work here. Thank you very much. The unit manager is Dr. Kaiser Tembo, can be contacted at kaiser.tembo@sahpra.org.za. I thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was really informative. And it's really good to see that complementary medicines is following all these procedures and processes, and that we all have a good guidance on how to apply these things. For us in the Western Cape, this is a very important sector, particularly because we've got such significant biodiversity, and there are companies who are trying to explore different ways in which we can serve our health community through this biodiversity and complementary medicines. So thank you very much. We do have one question, and that is, well, it's more of a statement. So I wonder, Rob, you maybe just assist. People are saying that they're not seeing the slides on the guidelines. Okay, that has been shown.
Yes. If I may come in on that, the guidelines are actually very long documents. For example, just one is about like 147 pages. There's another one is 25 pages. So I did not load the guidelines on the slides. Hence, I make reference. But it's very easy if one go to the website, the portal as indicated. They are very easily accessible there. One can go through those guidelines. I mean, for the guidelines only, we need maybe a workshop for each one of them.
Okay, well then I think we've got our future workshops cut out for us between Westcro and SAHPRA, and we're happy to assist with that. Okay, so the speaker of the hour, it's my honor to ask Dr. Boitumelo Semete to begin her presentation. I think this is the one we've been really looking forward to. This is definitely one I've been looking forward to. And I really look forward to hearing, Dr. Semete, how you guys are planning on landing a rocket on the moon whilst you're in the air. A lot of fantastic things have been happening during COVID, and you've also recently taken over the reins. So yeah, so let us begin.
No, thank you. Thanks for having us as SAHPRA, and I hope you found the presentations from my two colleagues helpful and insightful. So I'm going to give a high-level presentation on our priorities and some of the regulatory updates. I hope you can see my slides.
Yes.
Good. Move this so that it's not in the way. Okay. So, I mean, many of you are aware that we are on a transformation journey. We were initially the MCC, which was a secretariat within the NDOH. We've now been established as a Section 3A, Schedule 3A entity according to the PMFA, which gives us a level of autonomy, and also will remain to be accountable to the minister through the SAHPRA board. As part of this journey, we've made significant progress in implementing some organizational shifts. Firstly is around us, corporatizing this public entity, and the board has been established and appointed, and they've been now in existence for about 3 years as SAHPRA board members. We've also, from a compliance perspective, have ensured that in the last 2 years we comply with the PMFA governance and regulatory requirements that speaks to reporting, as well as being audited by the AG. The key really differences between MCC and SAHPRA, I'll just highlight 3 really. The first is that, we're now not a secretariat within the department. We are basically, we have this autonomy as an organization, and our intent is to be knowledge driven. So not only assume a secretariat role, but really ensure that we've got capacity to make regulatory decisions. The second big change really is that if you remember, the MCC dependent largely on the council as well as external evaluators. And the intention is that we need to build internal capacity so that we limit the reliance on external experts. So we'll always need external expertise, but we want to ensure that we've built this capability internally. We also have our mandate being expanded. You know, the two areas that were covered today being medical devices and IVDs, and Andrea spoke to that and where we are in terms of the regulations, and also the area of complementary medicines that you've just been taken through, and radiation control. So our mandate has expanded. And we also have our processes re-engineered. This is again the third major difference between MCC and SAHPRA, and that as we re-engineer these processes, we can also apply reliance, which is an aspect that was not covered in the Act, which was subsequently amended to give effect to SAHPRA. So we are on a journey. We've, you know, also positioning ourselves strategically as an organization. We aim to be effective. I think a number of you are familiar with some of the challenges that we've had as MCC. It doesn't mean we don't have them as SAHPRA, they remain to be there, but I think we're making good progress towards addressing those. And it's going to take some time, but I think we are heading in the right direction. And what we want to do is to enable access to safe, effective, and quality medicines. We also want to enable innovative product development and access thereof, and hence these areas that have been included in our mandate. We also want to be an enabler of local health industry growth. With the re-engineered processes that we've put in place, one of the key projects that we're implementing is digitizing our operations. Again, this is a long-term project, but we've already started, and some of you may have experienced the ease of submitting dossiers. So again, not perfect, but we've got a plan on how we can completely digitize our operations. We also want to enable the NHI that aims to facilitate universal health coverage. So that's again another big priority for us. And then partnering with relevant stakeholders, particularly being able to educate the public on you know, the areas that we cover. You know, one of the key aspects within our mandate is safety of medicines, and it really speaks to ensuring that the public has access to safe products. And so we need to be engaging a lot more with the public. But also we want to support the growth, diversification, and the competitiveness of industry, and hence, you know, we made ourselves available for this so that we can share information, share the guidelines, talk you through the requirements, etc. We remain to be open to that. I've indicated that we want to position ourselves as a thought leader, as a trusted knowledge source, so that with any information that comes up, the latest information, one should be able to access trusted information through us as a regulator. We also want to openly, you know, publish some of the insights from our work, particularly work that is in the public domain, again, to ensure that we support access to information. I've already alluded to awareness campaigns, you know, even on some of the products that we are already regulating, but even with some of the emerging therapies. We want to engage the public and educate them on these. And, you know, even with COVID now, we had the opportunity to, I think Andrea shared a slide where she showed, you know, all the media platforms that we were in, the engagements that we had. And it was really in an effort to educate the public. And as we support innovation, external innovation, we would also then want to support and create a culture of innovation internally. So one of the things, and you mentioned CBD, which was covered again to some extent in the previous presentation, is, you know, you may be aware that we've amended the schedules. And as I've indicated, I think there's still areas where there's room for growth, and you know, we plan to educate the public around what it means, what these amended schedules mean. We just have been so focused, like everyone else, on COVID that, you know, some of the projects we've had to put on the side. But these are things that we will be driving going forward. These are some of our goals and our strategic priorities that I thought I'll share with yourselves. The first is that we want to be globally recognized and an effective and a well-functioning regulator. We want to align with global trends and practices, and you know, the colleagues spoke about reliance. Again, that's an approach that we are implementing and we want to optimize. We want to ensure strong stakeholder engagement, and that will enable us to be a transparent and an effective regulator. So we engage quite a lot. And again, that's why we availed ourselves for this discussion today. We already do have a number of partnerships, both internationally and within the continent, but we want to expand those. And when I talk to a slide later around some of the trends that we're seeing, it highlights the need for us to partner and strengthen some of our partnerships. I thought I'll also share some of our learnings that we will be implementing in our operations from the COVID experience. I think everyone has learned one or two things, if not even more, from COVID, and are relooking their business, relooking their strategies, etc. So there's 4 things really that we want to bring into how we operate. The first is we will be open to learning from other regulators, and yet while we learn from them, we want to apply what is locally relevant for our context. We will be collaborating, as I've indicated, and we want to collaborate even more. We've seen the value of collaboration, even now with the COVID response. We engaged a lot with our partners in the academic sector and other government departments. And so it really strengthens us as a South African regulator to be able to pull on all these minds and excellence that we have in the country. What we've also really learned is around being agile with our processes to accommodate the rapid change, pace of change that we experience. And again, we're wanting to bring that agility into how we work. And while we are agile, it's important that as a regulator, we remain to be stringent, because as the public, you rely on us to say whatever product that is out in the market, if it has a SAHPRA authorization, you rely on us to say it's a safe product. And so there is a level of stringency that we will always have as a regulator. And then just lastly, I thought I'll just touch on some changes that we're seeing in the regulation space, in the regulatory sector, and changes that we are just reflecting on internally and saying, how do we ensure that we keep abreast of all of these developments? Firstly, we're seeing that regulators are working more and more to becoming efficient, and we have to be efficient as a regulator. The World Health Assembly has identified that inefficient regulatory systems are a barrier for access to safe, effective, and quality medical products. And we realize that if we remain inefficient, we will be disserving the people of the country. What we're seeing also is that across various regulators, and these are some that we work with quite closely, the logos that I've indicated here, we're seeing that a lot of them, their scope is expanding. And while with ours, we included new areas that we regulate, but even within some of the traditional areas, because of the technological advances, regulators are finding that they're having to expand. There's an increase in volumes, there's complexity of products, even in the clinical trial area, you've noted now with COVID that we've had to be agile as a regulator and say, how do we prepare ourselves to be ready to register a COVID vaccine that may have not taken as long as typically what vaccines do. So, the complexity and yet the speed and the pace of change continues to be rapid. And so we have to keep up. With these advances and the scope increasing, we obviously need then, strong talent to support that. And so, some of our efforts are around how do we attract and retain strong talent. The next one I want to talk about again is around the technological advances, and I kind of have alluded to this already, particularly with COVID. I think it was a key learning experience for us and many others, as I've indicated. And then lastly, there's a growing trend towards harmonization of regulators across regions for collaboration and work sharing. In the continent, we've, for example, are part of Zazibona, which is a SADC initiative that involves a number of countries, and we can do joint reviews, and this then fast tracks authorization and approval of products. We're part of ABREast, which does a joint review of clinical trials. There's the SADC Regulators Forum, there's the AMRH and AMA. So there's all of these fora that have been established to help regulators be a lot more efficient and also efficient with the use of the limited resources that we all have. So we're really seeing that work sharing, collaboration are becoming pertinent in the regulatory space. And so we really are trying to ensure that we partner with the relevant stakeholders, because we believe that as we do so, we again will be an enabler in that, we would drive efficiencies in applications. So with this slide, I think I'll end here, and I hope that it covers, at a high enough level, some of our priorities. And I'd like to thank you all for having us this afternoon. Thanks.
Thank you. One thing that's definitely become quite clear for me during the course of this presentation is how SAHPRA has definitely stepped up. We've seen that for regulators across the world, COVID has created this watershed moment where innovation in this space has been forced, and it's wonderful to see how you guys are already thinking about all this stuff, and we're not even a year into the pandemic, and I think SAHPRA is also stepping forward as a leader on the African continent. So this is really good news for me, at Westgrow, but I think it's also really good news for the industry to see, the leadership that is coming from SAHPRA in this area. We do have two questions for you today. The first being, how does SAHPRA plan to provide preference to locally manufactured products and companies?
Sure, and thanks for that question. Andrea maybe covered this, but even now with the COVID response, we had put in place a specific mechanism for locally developed products. I mean, if we look at the ventilators, we had the National Ventilator Project, and I think we played a very important role in facilitating authorization of those ventilators and subsequent access to that. So we are very much cognizant about the innovation and the developments locally, and that as a regulator, we must support that. So we currently are also having discussions with our board to say, while we did it for COVID, and we had a specific track for local applicants in specific instances, how do we make this become part of our strategic objectives and areas that we implement? So very soon we will be sharing some of the approaches for both medicines, medical devices across the whole range, complementary medicine, cannabis, all of that. So there's some really exciting conversations happening. Please do pardon me, I've got my little one here.
He's welcome to join the webinar. So there is a follow-up question to that, and this one is specifically with respect to ISO 13485 and medical devices. Is there anything in particular you'd like to mention with regard to support for local accreditation in that area?
I'm going to ask Andrea. Andrea, I don't know if you're still on the webinar to speak to that. I see you are.
Yes, thanks so much. And that's a great question. So we know that any SAHPRA license holder for medical device establishment needs to be accredited to ISO 13485. We also recognize that we don't have lots of local conformity assessment bodies. So we're working closely with SANA so that we can really develop that network, and so that there are more options for the local interaction as such, and having a bigger base of locally accredited conformity assessment bodies.
Okay, thank you. I think that's very well answered for both those questions. Localization is definitely an area we're all focused on and all trying to work on. I think especially at this time where we are experiencing job losses in the economy, and if we can do whatever we can to get companies to grow, that responsibility is on everybody's shoulders. So, and it does appear strategy. So yeah, so we're all working collaboratively towards this goal. SAHPRA, I would like to thank each and every single one of you today for making yourselves available for this webinar. And yes, other than that, I would just like to say have a fabulous afternoon, and please join in tomorrow. We've got some wonderful sessions lined up.